Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so happy that you're a part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. We hope that you subscribe to the show. You can find the Reading with Your Kids podcast wherever you find podcasts. One great place to subscribe is on Podbean. Today's show features author Jodi Stapler telling us about the Cornelia Chronicles. Before Jodi joins us, we want to remind you that the Reading with Your Kids podcast will be at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, November 23rd and 24th at Navy Pier in Chicago. We are creating a totally interactive booth where you and your kids can experience what it's like to be a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. You'll get a great souvenir MP3 file that you can play with your friends, complete with intros and outros, and we may even use your interview as part of a future episode of the podcast. And you can save $3 on every ticket purchase by going to shytag.com and using the promo code RWYK. That's the Reading with Your Kids initials, RWYK. It's the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, November 23rd and 24th at Navy Pier in Chicago. We're really excited about being at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair for so many reasons. One of the reasons is that we're going to be creating this really neat experience. We're going to be displaying a number of books written by authors who've been on the show. And we're going to invite families to take a minute to check out some of those books, one of those books, if they have time to read them, read it together, and then come over and record a little review. Let us know what you think about the book. Let us know what you think about the illustrations. You are going to have we're going to send you that MP3 file with intros and outros, and it's going to be a great souvenir of your time with us at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair. And we may be using your interview as part of a future Reading with Your Kids episode. Now, we're really excited. Some of the books that we'll be featuring are some of our favorites. And one of those books is just a book that you just absolutely have to read out loud. And what would make a better read out loud book than a book that has 6 cranky relatives, 3 mean dinosaurs, and 1 very cranky Tyrannosaurus? That's right, we're talking about The Last Surviving Dinosaur, the Tyrannosaurus, written by Stephen Joseph and playfully illustrated by Andy Case. This book tells a tale of how the dinosaurs became extinct. And we're not talking about that life-ending meteor shower the paleontologists often cite. Yeah, no, that's just a cover-up. The Tyrannosaurus is so cranky that she makes all the other bigger and meaner dinosaurs disappear. That is, until she comes across the only dinosaur who is immune to her incessant complaining, the Tyrannosaurus. These 2 dinosaurs evolved into humans, and that's where cranky people come from. This really is a fun book that reminds readers to be mindful of when and how often they complain, a lesson from which all readers, young and old, can benefit. The Last Surviving Dinosaur, the Tyrannosaurus, is available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other sites where books are sold. Join us on the line right now from the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area, an absolutely beautiful part of the world. If you haven't been there yet, you want to check it out. Please welcome back to the show the author of the brand new middle grade series, the Cornelia Chronicles. Please welcome Jodi Stapler. Jodi, how are you?
Fine. How are you? Thank you so much for having me here again.
I'm really excited to have you back. It's, as we were saying, the Lancaster area. It's a beautiful part of the world. If someone who's never been to Pennsylvania, never been to Lancaster, asked you to describe it in 1 or 2 sentences, what would you say?
It is beautiful. Let's see, there's lots of farm country, you're driving around, it's a lot of farms and trees. And of course, Pennsylvania is known as Penn's Woods. That's what Sylvania actually means. So this land used to be completely covered in trees. And So you still see that every so often with the little brooks. And, I just came back from Ireland and for a trip with my sisters. And honestly, it looks very similar in certain areas as what Ireland does. So it's that kind of, green pasture land, which is really nice to be in, which right now I'm sitting outside in today because it's such a beautiful day. So, it's a great place to live.
Yeah. I have this beautiful memory. When my son was born and my wife was on maternity leave, we're brand new parents, and I had a tour of the central Pennsylvania, Lancaster area. And so, I said to my wife, come on, let's go. And we just traveled around the area, and it was her first time down to central Pennsylvania and Lancaster and Hershey and all those places. And she loved it. And we just fell in love with it, and we go down there often.
Yeah. When you grow up here, you kind of forget how beautiful it is, but the more you travel outside, you realize that, it really is a really nice place to visit, especially if people don't have a lot of farmland or have areas where they can see lots of land like this. So yeah, it's a great place.
Well, now that we've given a great plug to the Lancaster Tourist Bureau, let's talk about the Cornelia Chronicles.
Okay, well, Cornelia is an 8-year-old girl, middle child, 2 sisters, and she's based a little bit on, I shouldn't say a little bit, she's based on my childhood stories. She's a busy kid, always comes up with new ideas, and in this first book, which is Cornelia Needs a Space of Her Own, she wants to find her own room. She shares a room with her younger sister, and she feels like she needs her own space. So being the curious and creative kid that she is, she kind of goes around the house and tries to see where she could turn into her own room. One, she picks her mother's painting studio. She goes through and she tries to set it up just like she would want it as a bedroom. She doesn't care that there's boxes or anything like that. She just moves things around. Ends up that doesn't work out. So she goes to the back porch because, who wouldn't want to sleep on the back porch? Mm-hmm. And that doesn't work out. And so she goes to the attic and she moves everything around, and lo and behold, there's bats at night. So that doesn't work out. But eventually she finds her own spot, and it really is in her own bedroom. Her mom helps her and her sister work it out so that they have their own space. But it's very much like myself as a child. I'm a Girl Scout leader, so a lot of the kids that I have in my troop are very busy girls, and that's kind of what Cornelia is. That's who she is.
You mentioned that Cornelia is a middle child. We hear a lot about middle children, and that they can face some special challenges sometimes.
Yeah, being a middle child, sometimes you're not, of course, the oldest, and you're close enough to the oldest. Well, for me, for instance, I have 2 sisters, and being the middle child, my older sister was very close with the baby. She would always cater to the baby in the family, and my mom wanted to hold the baby, and the middle child kind of always is searching for where they fit in, where do they belong. And most middle children that I know, we tend to, have kind of our own personalities and be those kind of out there kids. So, but that was how we got attention, and that's kind of the same as how Cornelia is in this book.
Well, I love out there kids. I'm not a middle child. I'm an oldest child, but you hear all these stories, and I mean, stories and stereotypes are created for reasons. They're not right. Pulled out of thin air. But I also think it's a lot of times we depend too much on those stereotypes, and we kind of judge people too much, and we don't take the time to really get to know people as individuals.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and that's one part of this book as well. It's that, mom sees like the oldest sister as the sporty child, and she sees the youngest child as, just her baby. And then she sees Cornelia as the busy, always getting into things. type of kid. But at the same point, she sees Cornelia as being very resourceful, and she knows that she doesn't really have to worry about Cornelia all that much because Cornelia will figure out a way. And that's where we're going with this series. The next series that we're working on right now is next book in the line of the series is Cornelia and the Fancy Lunch. And so it's Cornelia always seems to get these great ideas. She has this list of things that she wants to accomplish in the summertime, and she's marking them off as they go along. And this first one, like I said, is she needs her own space. So she does everything she can to figure it out, and that she's persistent and determined and everything we want kids to be.
Well, I'm really happy that Cornelia is someone who has a lot of ideas and she follows through on them. That's one of my weaknesses. I have lots and lots of great ideas, and I'm excited about them for about an hour and a half. And
yeah, I'm with you on that one. I have the same personality. I always have great ideas, and sometimes, if I don't write them down, they do just become a fleeting moment. And this is one thing that Cornelia is good at. She loves to make lists. She keeps them all through all the books so far. And not only like lists, like this book doesn't only include her finding her own room or her own space. She also does a lot of science projects because she's, like I said, she's always coming up with something new. She'll see something outside and be like, oh, I wonder what happens with this. And so she'll go out and try, putting worms in a jar and seeing what happens if she puts black paper over the jar and waits a few days and things like that. So, it was a fun book to write.
Now, you mentioned to us that you are a Girl Scout leader. How much of that influenced or inspired you in writing the Cornelia Chronicles?
Oh, it inspires me a lot. I've been with my Girl Scout troop now. We're juniors this year. Well, actually, I have first-year cadets and second-year juniors, and we have about 15 girls. And I've been with them since they were daisies, which is the very first year. So we've been now together for 5 years. And so I've seen these little girls grow, and I get to spend time with them. And we just had our first meeting last week, and we went around the room and asking, what keeps you in Girl Scouts, and what do you like about Girl Scouts, and what do you want to do? And, every single one of them, they come up with such great ideas. But then I look around and I think the reason I stay with it is because of the girls. Mm-hmm. It's so much fun to go camping with them and then look back. At the time, it seems like, oh, why do we do this? It's so exhausting and we don't get any sleep. But then we come home and we look at the pictures and we talk about what happened. And it's just, I don't know. It's such an experience for everybody. And I think all kids should do that kind of thing. But Cornelia reminds me a lot of some of the girls in my troop.
That's really cool. We hear a lot these days about Boy Scouts and the fact that they're admitting girls into their troops. And I know you're not a spokesperson for the Girl Scouts, but as a leader and as somebody who's been involved in it, what do you think about that? What's the value of? I don't need you. If you have an opinion on if the Boy Scouts should or shouldn't, invite girls in, but tell us why do you think it's important for girls to have their own space?
Well, I'll tell you. I have 3 older boys, and I was a Cub Master for a long time. So I really do feel strongly in the Boy Scout Association. And some of the girls in my troop are both in Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. And I think that's great if you can fit that balance. The reason my daughter and I have not moved over to Cub Scouts at this point is because I feel like girls need a place of their own. And Boy Scouts, the girls that have joined the Cub Scout Association, to me, it feels like we're like a tag-along. Mm-hmm. I know they've changed the name to Scouts of America so that it feels more like we belong. But to me, it still feels like it's just one more second-hand thing that a girl gets. And with our world, it's so hard for girls to find something that's just their own. Mm-hmm. And that's why we stick with Girl Scouts.
That's wonderful. I'm sure that I'm wondering, do the girls in your, I don't know if it's a troop or
troop.
Mm-hmm. Do any of the girls in the troop kind of look at Cornelia and go, that reminds me of me?
Yeah, a bunch of the girls were my beta readers in the beginning because I wanted to make sure that it fit with them, and I had such a good feedback with them that they were like, "Oh, I can't wait to read the next one," and a couple of them like, "Oh my gosh, did you do that when when you were Cornelia's age?" and things like that. So yeah, it's fun to like bring them into it. They're usually my beta readers actually. And they will not hold back. They will tell you if they don't like something. So that's always great.
And that's such a valuable tool. I mean, I always encourage writers, especially who are going to be publishing independently, to make sure that they invest in an editor and get that feedback. But having a troop of young women in that, the audience that you're writing for, what an invaluable asset to have.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it's great to share stories because then they will tell me things that they've done that are similar to what's going on in the book. And then it brings up all kinds of talk because the moms are also included. And so then they'll start talking about things. And it's always nice to get moms and girls talking about their childhood. Sometimes it's hard for girls to realize that their moms were young at once,
Well, you bring up a really good point. We always celebrate the fact that reading together, it's a great way to start conversations. Especially if you're talking about difficult subjects. It's a lot easier talking about the issue of bullying when you're talking about something that's going on in a book as opposed to what's going on in your school.
Right. Absolutely.
I also think that sharing stories of our own childhood with our kids, it's a wonderful way to start some really meaningful conversations within families.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because we've been there. We've had the experiences, and yes, they're a little bit different now that technology is so much more advanced than when we were kids. But we do have something that's similar that happened to us. And so if you suspect something that's going on with one of your kids or at school or on the bus, sometimes if you just kind of bring up that idea with a story that happened to you or someone you knew, it'll bring that open mind for your child to come out and say, "Hey, this is what's going on, and yeah, I'd like to talk about it." So, I mean, talking about it is great, reading about it is great, but of course, always having that connection with kids is what's important.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, things are different these days. You don't, when kids are talking to their friends on the telephone, they don't have to stand up next to the wall, next to the thing that's attached to the wall, and you can only go so far away. But they're still on the phone talking about relationships, and those kind of relationships, they're like universal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mentioned independent authors and authors who publish independently. You are a little bit different in that you are an author and you're also a publisher. You have your own publishing house.
Yeah, I actually publish a lot more books than I write. In fact, you've spoken to a couple of my authors, which thank you so much for having them on. I started because, to be honest, it was before I even started writing my own stories. I've always been the type of person that felt like I needed to help others do what they wanted to do or to dream their dreams. And I grew up with a house with a mother who was a big dreamer, but never really followed through with things and ended up passing away at 60 and never finished things. So, I've just felt like I needed to help those and push for those that really want to have their stories published or go somewhere or do this. And, I'm kind of that person. I'm the person that, come on, let's do it. We can do it. So yeah, I started my own publishing company about 2016. It's called Willow Moon Publishing. Most of the books that we publish are children's books because I am a teacher and a Girl Scout leader and grew up in the children's theater. So children are very much, centered in my life. But we do have other authors that we've written some short story anthologies and a mystery novel. So we do a little bit of everything, but we really like to keep it to the stories, the children's stories.
One of the things that's been really popular on the show, anytime we've been able to have a publisher or marketing director on, to have an opportunity to ask you and the expert in the field, somebody that's experiencing success in the field, what kind of advice would you give to an author, especially an author that's out there kind of by themselves and trying to publish their book independently or looking for a publisher to publish their book? What kind of advice would you offer to them?
Right. Well, I'll tell you, nowadays, it really, unless you can get published by one of the big five, you're going to make more money if you self-publish. And that's odd coming from someone who is a publisher themselves. But it's true. You make more money. You're not going to become rich by publishing a book. But you also need to remember that even if you have a publisher that publishes it for you, in today's world, we need to market ourselves. And that's something that a lot of authors don't realize. They think that once they get published, that's all they have to do, that they hand over their book and they're done. But you really have to push to get your name out there, to get your book out there, to make sure that people know you're out there, because there are so many authors and so many books that are on Amazon or that are in bookstores, that if you don't have an audience, they're not going to know to go buy your book. Mm-hmm. So you really have to work on marketing yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, we say that all the time here when we're talking about our Certified Great Read program. I always start off by saying, hey, you're an author. You finished publishing your book. I bet you were surprised to discover that now you're the marketing director for your book.
Yeah. Yeah, and it surprises a lot of authors because, you have this dream of becoming a published author, and you think that you pass off that manuscript and you're done. You're done with your work. But really, the marketing, sadly enough, is probably the hardest work of all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's true whether you're self-published with, or you're working with a small publisher, and even authors who've been on the show that are published with some of the biggest publishers in the business.
Yeah.
They're all out there working really hard, marketing their book, pushing their book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
People always are thinking of that advance that, you get with a big publisher. But a lot of times, even those big names like Tom Clancy and things like that, they are using that advance for the marketing and
mm-hmm.
press.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like what I guess people imagine publishing a book would be.
Yeah, just sitting in your office and banging on the typewriter and sending it off, and then waiting for the royalty checks to roll in.
Exactly. I wish.
That just happens in books.
Yeah, exactly. Or TV.
Well, where can folks go? Well, I guess one of the things we should ask is Willow Press, do you accept submissions from authors? And if you do, how can folks contact Willow Moon Publishing?
Yes, you can go to willow-moon-publishing.com or willowmoonpub.com, and there is a section for queries. Basically, I do prefer to get them through emails, not as attachments because of viruses and things, but mm-hmm. a small, brief synopsis of the book and what your plans are. And I'll be honest, in the last couple months, I've gone on to then ask those stories that I do think would be a good fit for us to go and tell me what your marketing plan would be. So you really do have to put some effort into that and to think about it, because I can't do it all by myself. So that is something that I do require my authors to also work on. But they can feel free to go ahead and email me at willowmoonpublishing@gmail.com and send me their queries, and a little bit about themselves and a little bit about the book and maybe anything that they've published in the past. And I look forward to looking at all that.
That's awesome. And if folks are interested in learning more about the books that you are creating and also learning about your school visits and the fact that you're a singer and an actor and all that stuff, how can folks find out more about Jodi Stapler?
Yeah, you can go to my website, which is Jodi, J-O-D-I, Stapler, and I always say just like the office supply tool because people think I say Stabler. So Stapler, S-T-A-P as in Paul, L-E-R.com, and you can find everything about me there.
Yeah. No, Stabler, that's the guy that made the mistake of leaving Law and Order.
That's right. That's right. It actually, my name comes in handy when I'm substituting, because I substitute a lot. I will go in on the board, and if I don't make the joke first about it being a stapler, it becomes like, oh, we're making a joke on this teacher. But I will draw a stapler up on the board just so that they know I'm in on the joke, and we're good to go.
It's always good to get in on it first.
That's right.
Well, we've been talking to the author of the Cornelia Chronicles. It's a brand new middle grade series from our guest, Jodi Stapler. Jodi, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure speaking with you again.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be our friend, Derek Taylor Kent. He will be here to tell us about the grossest picture book ever. Oh, it's going to be nasty fun. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If you are the author of a really gross picture book or a really beautiful picture book or any kind of book that is aimed at young people, we would love to have you as a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. It's really, really easy. All you need to do is go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, click on the contact button, let us know about your great book. We will let you know the next easy steps. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Jodi Stapler. Be sure to check out the Cornelia Chronicles. I want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. Don't miss her blog. You can find it at the readingwithyourkids.com website. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. And, of course, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for being part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. And thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.